Hello, and welcome to an evening of fiction horror reading with Canadian author Nancy Kilpatrick. My name is Mark Leslie Lefebvre, and I'm honored to have Nancy in this virtual, gorgeous library with me. Nancy, welcome.
Hi, Mark. It is Murray for sure.
So, what are you going to treat us with tonight?
I'm reading chapter of Revenge of the Vampire King.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm going to jump off stage and let you give it a go.
Okay. Okay, this is the first book in my series, Thrones of Blood. And as you've been here before, you know that I started reading them backwards. Now I'm up to one, which is the first one. So I'll just read it and then maybe we'll have a little discussion after. Morta sat on the black marble throne, impatiently watching the parade of his warriors as they entered the cavernous gray stone throne room in sixes through the massive oak doors. Directing this procession was Wolfsbane, his second in command. His most trusted warrior, dressed like all the other tall and lean Vampirii streaming in. Sleeveless black metallic banded shirt and kilt, knee-high black leather boots laced through 40 holes, battle gear. The Vampiri style favored long hair pulled severely back on the head through a cone that was metal and contrasted in color to the hair, the strands dangling down the back like the tail of a horse. Even after nearly 200 years as king of the Vampiri, Mortis still felt a welling of pride as he watched this assembly of his strongest and bravest. On display was booty garnered from their raid on the Sapien realm. There were ruby red, sapphire blue, and aventurine green jewels of varying shapes and sizes, hammered copper and gold bracelets, luxurious black and white furs, multi-hued cloth woven to a fine, soft texture, delicately filigreed hardwood furniture inlaid with ivory and ebony, aromatic spices used by the slaves for cooking, small animals of every sort kept as pets. It went on and on, mostly useless items in Mortis' view, but what did his realm of death-bringers need with such goods? His warriors, all of his subjects, but for the slaves, they were Vampiri, living on blood. And these items might be interesting entertainment now and again, but were completely unnecessary to existence. And secretly, he thought luxuries encouraged weakness in those of his kind. Whether birthed as he had been, an exceptional event, or turned, as every other vampire in his realm, all were innately hunters, predators, and their skills relied on honing hungers to motivate them, not the acquisition of looted objects. But there were many types of hunger, and blood was but one of them. Revenge was another, and that a lust that he had began honing half a year ago, an appetite that proved to be an all-pervasive driving force. The land of the Sapiens is rich with goods, Wolfsbane noted. He was a handsome vampire, with wavy, dark brown hair and penetrating eyes the color of jade. Strong, powerful, and Morta relied on him. We swarmed and ravaged the mortals as revenge for what they did to you, our king, Wolfsbane continued. These are your prizes which we offer to you in adoration. Morta nodded, uncomfortable that his troops had been gone almost half a moon cycle without him leading them. But he had been in no shape to return to the realm of the Sapiens after the physical, mental, and emotional torture his enemies had inflicted upon him. His body had recovered sufficiently, and nearly so his mind, but he did not feel whole. A passion for vengeance sliced through him at the oddest moments, and he knew he had been changed forever by what he had endured as a prisoner. He felt required by custom to accept the spoils of war from his faithful as an indirect revenge, but it rankled. He would have preferred to be in the forefront of battle, rending and tearing his enemy limb from limb, the Sapien ruler at the top of his list. The row upon row of items brought into his throne room were symbolic, he knew, which is why he let this lavish show proceed. His subjects needed to affirm in his presence that they had been victorious against mortals, and they needed to see that their efforts pleased him. But he needed something more, and hoped this glut of goods would culminate in the knowledge he craved, that Wolfsbane had either secured the Sapien king and brought him to the land of Vampirii, or had killed him. Morta would prefer the former, of course, Revenge is sweetest when executed directly, but he would settle for the demise of his enemy at the hands of another. Bringing down the Sapien King from the side of the mountains would ensure peace and stability and danger-free hunting, at least for a time, and he wanted that for his kingdom. He owed it to his subjects. Incense, flora, leather, some exotic blue and green birds that he had never seen. It was an endless parade, including captive sapiens by the dozen, male and female, all young enough to be pleasing to look at, but he knew that most of his warriors were not examining their faces and bodies, but rather smelling the blood coursing through beneath their skin, slick with acidic sweat produced by terror. I selected only the strongest, my lord, as I knew you would prefer. You have often said there is no point in taking the weak. Their blood is thin and prone to disease, and that does not satisfy. I've said many things, my most trusted warrior, and you have a good memory, Moarte said, his features, unable, like all Vampirii, to reflect the smile he felt. If I had not known you for centuries, I would accuse you of flattering me unduly with some hidden agenda. I am not my sister, Wolfsbane said, with a touch of annoyance in his voice, referring to Hemlock, his twin, who, on more than one occasion, had tried to charm Moarte in order to be granted power. Hemlock would have liked nothing better than to be chosen by Moarte as a mate. Fortunately, as king by birth and not by transformation, Moarte had inherited a type of rational second sight from his blonde-haired, blue-eyed mother Belladonna, and a searing intellect and physical strength from his late father Morpheus, who had platinum hair and paler eyes. They bestowed fortitude and attractiveness as well, and Moarte, even had he not been king, would have had his pick of females. Hemlock had not gotten far with such duplicitous endeavors. When or if he ever mated, and with the passing of time that seemed improbable to him, it would be with a guileless female. He possessed enough guile in his character for two beings. And where is Hemlock? Moarte inquired, realizing he had not seen her in some time, and she was not in the throng of warriors crowding the hall. Did she venture on the hunt with you? No, she did not. Her battle skills are not lacking, but I felt we did not require her presence in this campaign. I suspect she has retreated to her chamber in a prolonged pout. Moarte felt some amusement at this. It was well known that Wolfsbane and Hemlock were adversaries in many ways, and that given his position as second in command of vampire warriors, Wolfsbane frequently deprived his sister of positions she would otherwise have automatically assumed. Partly this was out of spite, Moarte suspected, but also out of expediency. Hemlock was unpredictable and not given to following orders, dangerous traits in battle. Larger animals were brought into the hall, their strong odor annoying to the vampire olfactory, and Moarte said tensely, Wolfsbane, when may I expect this expedition to end? I have a more pressing matter to attend to than watching my subjects entertain themselves with these dubious treasures. Calmness, my son, Belladonna, seated to his right, said. Your warriors need to see your enthusiasm. It's part of vanquishing a long-time enemy. I have not vanquished him yet, mother, unless Wolfbane knows more than he is saying about the raid. Is the Sapien King, Zador, part of this circus? The question was directed to Wolfsbane, who answered truthfully, as always, because he knew Moarte could read him very well, and there was no use in avoidance. No, my king, he is not. Then you did not find him in the city. Wolfsbane hesitated. We did find him, and he managed to elude us. He distracted us, and must have escaped through a secret passageway into the mountain's haunted caves. Moarte felt the small amount of blood in his veins heat to a boil. They had lost him. The one who had tortured Moarte for weeks. The entire raid was a waste. He knew he should have led the hunt. He should not have remained behind, broken though he was. If he had gone, or he had waited until he was strong again, the Sapien King would not have evaded his fate. The mortal's blood would now be swelling Moarte's veins, and his head would be staked and hanging from the highest tower, a trophy of war, a final victory over the persecutors of the Vampirii. His soul would be, but King Moarte, I have brought you something almost as good. Moarte wondered what that could be, since nothing would equate with the capture of the Sapien King. He waited, and then his eyes fell upon the last item that was being brought into the throne room, a large cage covered by purple velvet, carried on horizontal poles on the shoulders of four of his sturdiest bloodsuckers. What is this? Another animal? He snapped, his tone a warning that everyone in the room understood, and because of the danger inherent in their king's temper, fell silent. This is a gift to you from the Sapien King, one he offered as a token of his desire for peace. It was during this exchange that he vanished, which I deeply regret. My king, it was my fault entirely, and I throw myself upon your mercy now. Wolfsbane knelt before Moarte, head back, exposing his throat to the fangs. Aggravated, Moarte snapped, "Stand," and waved a hand dismissively, indicating that he had no intention of punishing Wolfsbane. Wolfsbane was an excellent warrior, a friend even, one of the few Moarte trusted implicitly, and in a way he was glad that Daedra had escaped. It meant he still lived, and that would allow Moarte to hunt him down as enemy himself, and that thought gave him no small amount of pleasure. The warriors parted and let the bearers bring the cage, tall enough to house a newborn giraffe, almost to the bottom of the 3 gray marble steps that led to the throne. At Wolfsbane's orders, they lowered it onto the slate floor. You say this is an offering? Belladonna asked. As the former queen of the realm, she held a place of honor by Morta's side. Upon the death of her husband Morpheus, Morta's father, she assumed the reign, but only for a short time before relinquishing her right to rule, clearing the throne for her son, the only known half-breed born when she was still sapient. At times, though, she did not remember that she no longer held real power. Yes, Dowager, Wolfsbane said, the Sapien King offered this, in effect, a truce. We did, of course, not agree to a truce, but, as mentioned, the offer left us startled and confused, and this afforded the Sapien ruler a means of escape, which we now see as having been planned. Indeed, a rather poor excuse for your error in judgment. Or was it simply incompetence? Belladonna said. Wolfsbane bowed in her direction. If she were still in charge and he had bared his neck, her teeth would have been in his jugular by now, and he knew it. Moarte said, Mistakes occur, mother. I have made them myself, as you well know, as have you. She nodded slightly and surreptitiously brushed her son's bare arm to validate his remark, careful not to let the Vampirii see this intimate motherly act. Moarte did not acknowledge this touch of flesh as cold as his own. Instead, he said, All right, Wolfsbane, you have whetted my curiosity, and I wish to see an end to this pageantry. What is this wondrous gift that the Sapien King sent my way to make up for a month of torture in his dungeon? Wolfbane inclined his head slightly towards Moarte and then walked to the cage. Quickly, he pulled back the purple fabric, and as it lifted, wooden bars were revealed, like a prison holding something feral. What came into view was feral. The silence in the cavernous room echoed like a piercing shriek. Moarte stared, struck dumb, unable to believe what he was seeing. My lord, the Sapien King offered you his daughter in marriage to save his kingdom, to bind our realm to his, but really to save himself. Liar! The black-haired mortal screamed through the bars, where her wrists were bound on either side of her. My father would never agree to such a deal. You're despicable, all you vile dead things. Her slim, tense body was clothed from the top of her neck to her ankles in a crimson dress of silk. Her dark eyes shot a fiery malevolence towards Wolfsbane, and her teeth gnashed together twice, as if she would bite through the wooden dowling and disembowel him. But Wolfsbane was not watching her. He, like everyone else in the room, was watching Moarte. Moarte rose dangerously slowly, like the predator he knew himself to be, a predator fixated on prey. His mother attempted to secretly touch his arm again to temper him, but he ignored her. His eyes were glued to the girl, the Sapiens Princess Valada, only child of the Sapien King, and Moarte's newest enemy. Despite all that the Sapien King had ordered done to him by his chief torturer, she was the one who had tried to maim him, which ironically provided him with the intense motivation necessary to find a means to escape that realm and make his way home. It took nearly a full moon cycle to walk over the high mountain because he could not fly and his body was so damaged. There was almost no food but for the blood of the small earthbound creatures he could catch. Starvation kept him from recovering. He finally reached the Vampirii stronghold barely alive, a state that required many more months of convalescence. And now before him was one of his 2 tormentors. It was a dream come true. His movement had brought the girl's attention his way. He remembered her clearly, very clearly, and knew she remembered him. How could she not? She had whipped him often enough, as had the other in the Sapien King's dungeon, but it had been her hand which snapped the fine bones in his wings so that he could not escape through flight. Despite the Vampiri ability to heal rapidly, some injuries were fatal and others nearly so, and took much time to heal, if ever they did fully heal. The broken wing bones had required nearly 1 month to knit together, partially because of his enfeebled state, and partially because they had melded wrong, and when he reached home had to be rebroken, which only added to the excruciating pain. His mother ministrations with the salves and drugs made of herbs she had learned to recognize as a girl when she was still mortal. That helped. But much of the healing time involved him lying in agony, drinking as much blood as he could keep down, building his strength back one night at a time by sheer will, as the bones slowly wove together properly. And all the while he nurtured a white hot hatred for this girl, as the scalding desire for revenge festered within him. It was Wolfsbane who could not bear his suffering and insisted that Morton allow the warriors to attack the Sapien city and hunt down their king. Morton moved slowly down the 3 steps, his body tense, never taking his eyes off her. She was proud and haughty still, not accepting that she was a prisoner and one given freely to him by her treacherous father. Bloodsuckers, she snarled as he neared the cage, her dark eyes flashing hatred and defiance, and she spit at him. He paced slowly in front of her in one direction, then the other, many times, back and forth, silent. His fangs extended, his eyes, which he knew had turned the color of blood, radiating fury, never leaving her face, her eyes following him, the tension palatable to all in the throne room. I should have torn them off, the girl shrieked loudly in the quiet hall, referring to his wings. He stopped before her and stared down at the Sapien princess with hair and eyes the color of a raven's wings and skin nearly as pale as his own. The blood red dress, the black hair and eyes, all of it made for a startling contrast with her calcimine flesh, and she looked like a corpse to him, one more than 20, but not yet 30 of the Sapien years. It was rumored by slaves that she was truly her father's daughter, his only offspring, who he may or may not have been grooming to inherit the throne. Rumor also had it that his new young wife had conceived with the hope of a boy, but may have died in childbirth, the life in her womb dying with her. Wolfsbane would unearth the facts in detail from the newest Sapien slaves he had brought back with him. It was said this girl Valada was still a virgin, refusing to marry, and only in that regard going against her father's wishes. The father, no doubt, wanted a grandson to hand his crown to, since Sapiens preferred male rulers. It was known that otherwise she was devoted to him, wholeheartedly so, even when his subjects were not so enamored of their treacherous, brutal ruler. But her blindness to the reality of the Sapien king's cruelty did not alter Mortis' feelings toward her. His rage was so close to erupting that he felt on the verge of cracking the bars and snapping her head off her shoulders, gorging on her blood. He had enough control at his disposal to realize that such an action would give him immense pleasure, but only momentarily. The calculating reason that his father bequeathed him kicked in. If he was smart, he would use her in a way that would lead him directly to the Sapien King. And then he could destroy both father and daughter at the same time. His voice hummed perilously low, the result of holding himself in check. Take the cage to my chamber. Moarte was excited, rattled, brimming with violence and anger, logic in shockingly short supply. He would need time to summon thought to aid him. This was a rare opportunity. He had at hand one of his two enemies, the one he had spent months dreaming about, his fantasies of exacting revenge for her cruel and callous acts towards him, delicious and all-consuming. And she had been delivered into his hands by her own father. This was a precious gift that he must use carefully. Yes, it required much thought. You did well, Wolfsbane, he said, his voice still low, betraying the control he fought hard to retain. As if coming out of a trance, he woke to the hall and knew that direction was expected of him. Secure 1/4 of the riches for the crown and half that again for yourself. The rest is to be divided between the warriors, starting with these, he said, his hand sweeping across the front line, indicating the males and females who were the oldest and strongest, his premier warriors, who made up the bulk of his war council and had proven their bravery and loyalty time and time again. They will choose first, then the rest. Wolfsbane knelt, as did the first line of warriors, and behind them the others fell to their knees as one body, throats exposed before their ruler as a sign of deference. Moarte stalked out of the throne room through the side exit, the heat within him rising again to match the emotional fury he could no longer keep at bay. He needed time and solitude, and headed for the locked gardens at the back of the fortress, his private world, where none, not even his mother, were permitted to enter. He would meditate on this gift and what he could do with it, and he would not be disturbed as he entertained strategies. But the thinking part of him was nearly obliterated by emotions. And if the Sapien King had been killed in the raid, Moarte knew he would have torn the girl limb from limb quickly, publicly, glutting himself on her blood, just for the sheer pleasure of it. And that image brought a smile to his lips. He could always do that, once her father had been killed, and would. Oh, Mark's still there. Hi, Mark.
Awesome, awesome. That was fantastic. I have to pop up a few comments that appeared
Okay.
in the Facebook feed. Sarah Bianca says, "I love you and your work so much. Thanks
Oh,
for everything."
thank you.
And Elaine Pascal said, "It has been a while since I read this book, and I remember how much I enjoyed it. Great reading, Nancy Kilpatrick. Thank you."
Thank you, Elaine.
So, if we have time for a couple questions, I'd love to ask you a few things, if that's all right.
Sure.
So, I was curious, and this kind of goes back to the very beginning of the piece, the inspiration, what your inspiration might have been for the costume of the Vampir warriors, because they were very elaborate, specific. Was it just, is there a source of inspiration, or did it come from a bunch of different places?
Not really. The wings are just something that have it's been applied to vampires at different time periods, so that
Okay.
was obvious to me. But I was trying to make them. There are two species, as anyone who's been around with these readings knows. There's vampires and the humans, sapiens. They're
Yeah.
both very warlike. They're both very violent species, and I was trying to get the vampires to be clothes in a way sort of indicate military, so that they have a regimented way of being, as do the humans. So that's there was no real inspiration other than me trying to find a way to make them a unit.
Okay. And then the other thing that I've been wanting to ask you, from having done several readings, is how do you, as a writer, decide what specific piece from a book that you plan on reading for a live reading? Like, are there different elements that help decide what you're
Well,
going to read?
with this series, I've just been reading chapter one from all the books that are written. There's one more coming, but that won't be out this year, I'm pretty sure. So, the final book in this series will be done at some point. So it's not really I didn't really I don't choose chapter one. Chapter one was what I've been reading. So it's but
Okay.
if it comes to other types of reading. Sometimes it's the venue, and which might be online, or it might be, well, it used to be in person. We used to have places with people. It depends how many other people are reading, and it depends what the venue is about, what it's like. There's sometimes it's just it could be some other genre than horror, so I have to pick out something that's from somewhere else and make it sort of fit into that world. But yeah, I don't know, and there's also the time frame, because often if there are several readers, you're given a specific period of time to read, so you have to read something within that block that you've been given, which is often small because a lot of people.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what I was wondering. I mean, because obviously when it's your own reading, you kind of can control it and do, like, the first chapter is
Yeah.
a great teaser for the book. But yeah, so when you're limited, are there things that you decide, or would it just be like a smaller section of chapter one that you might read?
Well, if I hadn't been reading ones all along, I might have picked another section of this book. But I think the chapter, it's although it's a very long one compared to other chapters I've read, it gives a very good, I think, understanding of what this world is about. And one of the people who wrote a review about the book, uh, who is a writer for a pretty well known writer, he said this is really good world building, and I thought that made a lot of sense to me for the first book, because you don't know if people will read the second or third or fourth or whatever, but you have to
Right.
hope they will. But you cover some things again in book two just to get them, remind them. And and then there are people, of course, that feel that that's irritating, because, and I try not to even do too much of it, but I've had people say in comments, like on Facebook, well, she doesn't have to keep saying this, but I think, yeah, that's because you've read all the books. But somebody's going to pick
Right.
up book four isn't going to know anything unless I tell them. So just bear with me, because I really do I keep it vague. I don't keep it specific.
Right.
So it's just a general, thing. So yeah, it's funny being a writer, reading your own work, which I don't really enjoy. Still, I have to say, I still don't enjoy it. Um, but that's what I'm doing, or have been doing, and I'm done with now for a while, till next year, I guess.
Right. And
Yeah,
did I get this teaser correctly? Is that there is another book in this series that you are
yeah, there is
working
the
on right now?
finale. Yeah, yeah, because I've got in this story. Well, in this, you heard about the the Sapien King has run into the mountain, the caves in the mountain, because that are haunted. So that comes up again and again and again, and it comes out more and more. So that's what are these ghosts in the caves about? Why can the humans go in there and escape the vampires, but the vampires can't go in there because it's very haunted for them. Like
Right.
they are the recipients of the sounds and the vibrations of these ghosts that absolutely almost paralyze them. So if the humans run in there, they're stuck. They can't go after them. That's a problem. But the humans are safe. So yeah, but that's a big overarching plot. And as we go through the stories, there are bits and pieces that come out, and some of the female vampires are able to. They have some intelligence that lets them understand something, or be able to speak with, or some there's one that actually sees shadows, so they have some connection, and they get some more information that way. um, and so it's sort of interesting, I think, as a subplot, I guess. So that's
Right.
one of the two overarching plots that need to be rounded up, which will be happening in the final book, which I'm only a third into, because I've been writing another novel, which thank God is finished. So oh yeah, I'm just on the edge of. I've been, as we do, we revise, we revise, we revise, and I've gone over this book so much, but I really needed to cut some words out of it. So I need another, I think, 12,000 words to go or something. I'll be in
Right.
the realm, for books. So yeah, but that's taken up like a couple of years, because I was hit by the pandemic in a way, like not with COVID, but I was hit by the whole horror of the pandemic, as everybody else was, and I just didn't have the world that I need in which to create. and
Right.
and that and it's peculiar. I read an article about how people who are introverted, which I know I talk a lot, and people are, oh, she must be very extroverted, but I don't. I spend like days not saying a word to anybody. Basically, get I need a certain extroversion in my life that feeds into the introversion, and then I'm off on by myself, and I'm good. But that wasn't there, because obviously we weren't going out, we weren't seeing people for a whole year, almost a whole year, and then things changed a bit, and then they went back, and they changed. Oh yeah, yeah. So it hasn't been very good time for me in terms of productivity. I managed to write some stories somehow. I don't know how, but yeah. So that book took, probably the one that I just finished took, I think, 3 or 4 years, because I did almost nothing in the last 2 years. But I've been able to finish it, and it's going off to my agent soon. So see if she is interested in representing it. It's a science fiction horror book, so it's not vampires. And I should tell anyone who's here, who's listening, who knows my work, I just want to say there's no sex in it. None, because everybody accuses me of just, oh my God, if they think of an erotic writer, it's Nancy. I have written things without sex in the story. And that novel is one of those, if any people get together, it's a fade to black. So you're not going to see what's happening. Not in this book. There, I ruined my market already, right?
Awesome, awesome. Well, Nancy, thank you so much for the reading tonight and the chat about your writing. Looking forward to those next books as well. And people can find Nancy at nancykilpatrick.com. And I think Nancy has some closing thoughts for
Well,
us.
I want to mention, which I guess is already on the information, that these readings that I've been doing, including this one, have been through the Canada Council, which supports. They used to support in-person readings, but they now also support readings that are done on the internet because of the COVID. And they got these. This particular money comes through the Writers Union of Canada, which I and Mark are both members of, and so that's something that I see. I see Zephyr's comment. What? No sex. So yeah. So to thank those organizations for having our back, in this particularly bad time. And I have to thank Mark always because he's been wondrous. And I have to say, Mark is free now. He's free. The chains gone. He doesn't have to do these with me. I know he's going to say he enjoyed it and all that stuff, but
Nancy's
I mean,
gonna but Nancy's gonna write another book, and then we get to do more of these.
yeah, that's not for at least a year. But yeah, so thank you so much for Mark for being such a good, kind, wonderful human being that is responsive to people and helping. I appreciate that.
Awesome. And
Okay.
thanks
Thank you
again,
guys
Nancy.
as always. Bye.
Bye.